This content is on internal and external validity. So we'll start by talking about what we call elegant experiments. And you can see these words that we're using in this image, the 10 most beautiful experiments and elegant experiments. And these words are really used because science is a creative process. And when someone thinks of a creative, beautiful way to tease out a phenomenon of interest and test it, then those experiments are admired and they last across decades and generations and become what we call capital T theories in psychology. So elegant experiments have been designed and implemented to accomplish two things. First, they need to establish a clear cause-effect relationship between what is being manipulated and what is being measured. And secondly, it needs to produce these results in such a way that they can be easily applied to or generalized to the real world. So science doesn't want to stand in isolation. It wants to test a phenomenon or a relationship and then make sure that it fits in a broader population. So looking on, what is validity in research? So you'll see that I have first a definition. Validity in research: does the study actually test or measure what it intends to measure or test? And we can think about this in two ways that are related, but the one that's more important for where we are now in this course is the latter, the one that's in bold. But let's start with the former. So in measurement, we're always measuring something. In experiments or correlations, any kind of quantitative research, we're measuring something. And so a valid measurement tool actually measures what it claims to measure. So for example, if you want to measure aggression, you're interested in some factor that you think impacts aggression, but in order to demonstrate this, you have to be able to measure it. And aggression is defined as readiness to attack or confront. So someone is feeling fired up, they're ready to just challenge something. So how could we know if someone is feeling this way? So what you decide to do is use a questionnaire in which people just answer questions about how aggressive they felt after something happened to them. And the question that has to be asked is, does this actually measure readiness to attack or confront? Will people accurately be able to describe their own level of aggression, or would some sort of a behavioral measure be better? And a lot of people use a behavioral measure, giving participants in the research an opportunity to do something that might where they can act toward another person in an aggressive way without actually causing harm to the person. And that person would be a confederate and wouldn't be vulnerable in the experiment. But we can set up situations like that that might be better. And so in that case, the behavioral measure might be more valid than the questionnaire measure. Two ways of measuring the same construct. And so we're going to talk more about this later, so don't worry about this too much right now. But in experimental design, we think of internal validity. Those 2 points we made right in the first slide is the experiment carefully constructed and clean so that a clear cause-effect relationship can be established. And external validity: how well do the results among the study participants represent true findings among similar individuals outside the study? And that helps you answer whether your rights are generalizable to other situations or contexts. So to this end, what those 2 points were talking about was validity. How legitimate is the experiment? And we talk about two types of validity. Internal validity: did the experiment measure what it set out to measure? Did the IV, independent variable, produce the change in the DV, or dependent variable? And secondly, external validity: can the findings be generalized to other situations outside the experimental situation? And so these are the things that we look for when we're determining how robust or elegant or beautiful an experiment is. If they have a really strong ability to measure what they wanted to, And if they also apply to the outside world, then we get one of those elegant experiments. So let's compare internal and external validity just a little bit more. So internal validity, the researcher is focused on accuracy and a really strong research design, whereas external validity, the focus of the researcher is on generalizing to other situations. In internal validity, the researcher is trying to control the extraneous and confounding variables, but in external validity, the researcher is careful not to over-control, such that the situation is so unrealistic it couldn't be applied outside of the lab. In internal validity, we check to make sure that the conclusions reached by the experiment are warranted by the design. But external validity, we're producing results that apply to practical situations, real life. Internal validity, we're making sure we eliminate any other alternative explanations for the result or the outcome. But in external validity, we're being careful, not to overgeneralize to populations who aren't represented by the sample. So these two types of validity are always sort of working against each other. So if we have lower internal validity because we try to create a real life situation, we end up with higher external validity, the real life situation. But as we try to improve internal validity, we end up taking away from external validity. In other words, the more control we exert over experimental conditions, the less similar the conditions are to real life. And so good, careful research designs work hard to balance out these two competing objectives in research.